Today on Cringe Master, we are doing a much differently styled video, one that's a little closer to home. So sit back and please enjoy.
Standing here next to the MBTA Newburyport-Rockport line, one of the busiest lines in the entire Boston Interrail network. One of the reasons this line is so busy is because of the town we're in right now, Salem, Massachusetts, otherwise known as the Witch City by tourists and locals. This reputation exceeds itself, making Salem one of the busiest towns in the nation in terms of tourism, especially during the month of October, during Halloween season. That was Salem's crowded streets around the entire time of the year, as you can see here. Never mind the month of October, it's much more convenient to ride the train sometimes, if not all the time. Because of that fact, there's been a lot of stations of the history of Salem, Massachusetts, including what I just showed you. That intersection right there with all the cars going over it, let's go over some of the old tracks, old, present, and new. Even right next to the tunnel, there's a ventilation shaft just right across the street from the tunnel portal, which is where one of the old stations used to be.
Now, with all this talk of abandoned stations, where's the station now? Well, to answer that question, we're going to move to the other side of Salem.
We're with this absolutely massive garage and large platform. As we can see, the trains have begun to stop here, and this small town now turned into tourist attraction. Look at this. Yeah, take no fucking kidding.
Jake, with all this talk of stations around the city, in such overwhelming traffic that can be relieved by trains, why is there such a turbulent history of the trains in our city?
I don't know, David. What was the turbulent history? How about you tell us?
In the 1830s, railroads were hitting their boom time. This railroad came to Salem in 1838, called the Eastern Railroad, going from East Boston to Salem, with the station being described as a shed with Greek columns. This station was right here at this corner for 9 years. The second main station replaced the old one and was a bit further south. Many other stations were constructed at this time, and this wasn't the only station open in this area. In 1846, the other branch lines from the Eastern Railroad and other railroad companies would open up in the coming years, using the established railroad tracks the Eastern Railroad had set up to make branches that would go from Danvers, Peabody, Reading, Wakefield, Portsmouth, Boston, Marblehead, and a lot of other places. Just to give you an idea of the branches, here's some of the lines. And because of these branches and the main line, stations would open around Salem. It would also be during this time where the tunnel under Salem would be constructed. It's the same tunnel from the beginning of the video that we showed as well.
For the next 60 or so years, countless competing railroads would serve Salem, with small railroads being formed such as the Salem and Lowell and the South Reading branch, and the surrounding area with the Boston and Maine being a huge competitor to most of these railroads. Over the next few years, the Boston and Maine Railroad, or B&M, would become a conglomerate railroad and acquired most of the railroads in New England's regions north of Boston. This included the Eastern Railroad by the start of the 20th century. As of this time, the railroads were at their peak nationally and in the area, but their demise was also right around the corner. By 1920, railroads across the country were slowly losing popularity to local streetcar networks that would radiate all around the cities, and the railroads would also begin to fail to the personal car. This beginning decline here would begin a half-century's death for the American rail network. Salem's train network would not be safe from this decline either, as slowly lines began to be cut. That line mentioned earlier that went to Reading and Wakefield, for instance, closed in just 1926. By the 1940s, it only got worse as the cars on the intersection of Bridge Street and North Street were at a grade crossing with the railroad and railroad interchanges of northern Salem. The problem with this was that State Roads 114 and 107 went through this area, which screwed up the traffic for trains and cars and made a significant safety hazard. That's why, in the 1940s and 50s, the mayors of Salem decided to uproot the entire city's rail network by raising the road above the railroad and extending the rail tunnel under the overpass, effectively extending the tunnel. After this, the B&M unfortunately decided to close the original station in Salem that had lasted 100 years and simultaneously extended the tunnel for the entirety of Salem's downtown core to build a tiny little station. But before we talk about that, we must remember what else was happening at that time. Because while that happened, the rail network continued its demise and went into a death spiral, and the B&M was not about to be a glorious exception. Trains to Essex and Reading/Wakefield would close down in 1926, as previously mentioned, and some of that service would be cut back to Danvers. After that, the branch to Danvers would be reduced to a freight line by May of 1958. Marblehead's service was cut in half in May 1958 alongside the Danvers cut. By the next year, there was no more service going to Marblehead, and today it is a really good rail trail. So what happened to that little station? Is it still here today?
Well, no it wasn't. But it was for 30 years. That one station that we kept going to that was near the trail, well, that one replaced the old one that was gone. That's sad. Well, today it's a post office on the building with an insurance agency next to it.
But anyway, to explain that station, it opened in August 1958, and service was there for 29 years. The station was not there to stay for long, however, as in 1983 the bridge between Beverly and Salem that trains went over had caught on fire and was destroyed. This would cause a temporary station to be constructed on North Street. When this was constructed, it was decided to move the old small station to the temporary one, and make the Salem station service here begin in August 1987.
After 1987, the big dig began in Boston, which would affect a lot of state policy and require more parking spaces at MBTA stations to allow car drivers to take public transit rather than cars into downtown Boston, which would require the parking lot in Salem to dramatically grow in size. In 2013, the groundbreaking began, and by October 2014, the construction of the garage and the other improvement, the high-level platform, were both finished. Today, the station is the most used station outside the Central Boston stations, with it having about 2,300 boardings as of 2018 to 2019. The station is well used, especially in the Halloween season.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please comment down below because, and I quote, David has plenty more of these amazing videos ready to be published. That's a load of shit, guys, I hate to tell you. Otherwise, take care. Hope you guys had a great time. I know this was a very experimental video for the Cringe Master88 channel, but we're experimenting with a lot of things, just in general, but also especially to lead up of our next big series, Constitution Season 3. So, make sure to stay tuned. We're having a great time here, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Also, David, I do hope you know, for the majority of these amazing ideas, I really hope they just don't contain as much AIDS in the script as this goddamn video gave me, because god, do I have AIDS now, he fucked me.